Gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Rust.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a request for a point of personal privilege.
The gentleman has the floor.
As I have become known for, I'm going to be very brief. At some point in everyone's life, one chapter ends and another begins. I'm at that point in my life. I was first elected to my hometown town council in 1971, and since that time I've been honored to be in elected office for over 38 years, serving the same community that I graduated in high school from. During the one period when I had voluntarily, and notice I said voluntarily, retired from elected office, I was the rector of the Board of Visitors of Virginia University, and I was chair of the Fairfax County Civil Service Commission. So I've been in public life, public service, since 1971, a very long time, a chapter in my life that I value greatly, but which is now closing. Like most, if not all of you, I've worked full-time. I was fortunate to build and lead an engineering firm during that time, and I thank my partners for allowing me to do it. That chapter of my life continues. When I ran for this office in 2001, I had two main focuses that I was going to pay attention to: transportation and education, and that still holds true today. So I'll mention a few of those areas, some successful, some not. In 2002, I was part of the unsuccessful transportation referendum in Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads, which would have raised funds for transportation. That didn't work out too well, but I did learn from it. In 2004, I was part of the group that did a major K through 12 education funding effort. That vote landed me on the infamous least wanted poster. I still have that poster, which was signed by everybody except one, and I'm going to gift that poster to that individual. 2007, I was part of the transportation funding effort that was eventually declared unconstitutional. I was also part of the abuser fee, which those of you who were here, we thought that was a great idea. Our constituents did not. And that didn't work out too well. And finally, Mr. Speaker, in 2013, I was privileged to be a part of the landmark transportation bill that I'm extremely proud of. These are a few of the successes and a few of the failures over time that I've been here, and I was proud to be a part of all of those bipartisan efforts. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, I've been fortunate in my life to receive some recognition and awards from various groups in both my public life and my professional life. I treasure those, I truly do. But nothing is quite like being a member of this historic body. It's truly an honor to have served with you. So this chapter of my life is concluding. The next chapter of my life now begins, which I look forward to with enthusiasm and excitement. To paraphrase one member of the greatest generation, General MacArthur, I am not retiring. I'm advancing in another direction. To not seek re-election to this historic body was not an easy decision. When Ann and I reached this decision, she said to me, "Does this mean you're going to be home for dinner every night?" I'm not sure how to take that. Finally, to paraphrase another oft-quoted expression from the same individual, old politicians don't die, they just fade away. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a true honor to serve with you, the members of this body, and I wish you the best as you continue to serve the Commonwealth of Virginia and the citizens of Virginia. And there is no reception for me. Thank you very much.
Tom, I think you can see from that reaction the high esteem that we all hold. Gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox.
Mr. Speaker, point of personal privilege.
Gentleman may proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I hate giving these speeches. I don't know what you say. The gentleman from Fairfax came to me yesterday and broke what I consider the very, very bad news, that he was going to retire. And he told me that he couldn't be talked out of it because he knew what I was going to try to do. So that's what I did for the next 20 minutes. I said, why don't you come by my office and we'll chat. And I spent the next 20 minutes trying to talk him out of it. And for the reasons that I think he articulated, he, I think, really thought about it and firmly made up his mind. Really, my remarks are a lot of the same thing I said about the gentleman from Madison, Delegate Scott. I mean, he is just a workhorse. I mean, he's here for all the right reasons. He was actually, when I became whip, he was one of my deputy whips, and he was one of my best whips. You could always rely on Tom Rust. He's done landmark work in transportation. He's chaired a very tough committee. He's done it very, very ably. If you know anything about Tom, he's also probably the biggest Virginia Tech fan I think there is in the history of the game, so you'll often see him there, and I think this will give him more time to do that. He's the first, I think, of his family to actually go to college. And if you look what he's done in the education space, it's just remarkable. Longwood, for example, he's been rector of Longwood. He's been, of course, done great work there. Of course, his love of Virginia Tech. He's been on the board of visitors. He's been vice rector. And let's face it, he came from an extremely difficult district to win as a Republican. And I was always amazed how he won every single time he ran for election. And I think it's one reason. If you look, he was mayor of Herndon for 19 years, but his constituents saw him, and we use this term way too often, as a true public servant. And they saw him as a guy that would go down there and do the right thing. They liked him. I can say they almost loved him. And so he would have continued to win, I can tell you. That's why I tried to talk him out of it. So I just want to say that, Tom, we've been privileged to have you as a member of this body. You've done it right. You've made this body proud. Godspeed.
The gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Plum.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for a point of personal privilege.
Gentleman may proceed.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, I must tell you that I was a little bit taken aback this morning when I got the news that Delegate Russ was going to retire. We serve in an adjoining district, so I know Tom well back home. And I can attest to what others have said about his service to his beloved town of Herndon, where he served as mayor, where he became exceptional public servant, having support across the board. There were times, of course, when, as the way that we organize our government, There are Democrats and there are Republicans, and we have these things called elections. But the difficulty with the particular race in the 86th district was everybody supported Tom Rust. Across the board, it was the case that Democratic contributors, Democratic supporters all made it clear that they'd help Democrats, but they wouldn't help anybody against Tom Rust. And that speaks well for the fact that, as he enumerated, he's been involved in a whole lot of different things. His service in education has always been, to me, something that's exemplary. You know, I'm an educator by background, and so it's a career choice for me. But for Tom, it was a choice of service. Not only was he involved in the institutions of higher education, but he was very concerned about K-12 education as well. He took a sleepy little backward town of Herndon and brought it into the modern era. He did it by working across the board with the people of that district. You have heard him enumerate already what we've experienced around here, and that is his outstanding work on behalf of transportation. It's not an easy issue. Transportation issues vary so considerably across the Commonwealth. Being able to piece together a piece of legislation that'll help suburban and urban Northern Virginia and all the way to South Side and so on is not an easy task. It takes a lot of work and a lot of cooperation, and Tom was able to provide that important leadership. It's too bad sometimes, Mr. Speaker, that we talk in terms of Democrat-Republican when we really ought to talk in terms of service. And for my years of sitting here, you know, when I was first elected, we had 75 seats, and now we have 32. And I will tell you that I think the best period of time when I was here was when we were about 50-50. We co-chaired committees and so on, and I think we gave more of a focus to issues sometimes, maybe rather than we did partisanship. But even as the numbers changed, there were always those individuals who stood above the partisanship to work hard, and Tom is an exact example of how that's supposed to work. Setting aside partisanship, sometimes, as you know, taking issues that maybe weren't as popular as they might be with some of his colleagues in the Republican Party, but nonetheless speaking his conscience, standing up for what he thought was right. There may not be a reception today, but I predict when we go back home, Dulles Corridor Rail Association that I've been chair of and Tom has been vice chair of for many years, bringing forth a multi-billion-dollar Silver Line extension metro, we're going to have a party, and it's not going to be to celebrate his leaving, it's going to be to celebrate his accomplishments. And so it will be, I think, with organizations throughout Northern Virginia who will give him the kind of tribute that he deserves for his service. Tom, I'm not going to miss you because I'm going to see you around town, I suspect. But I will miss you here in Richmond for the good work that you've done. I commend your service to us all as an example of how we ought to be doing our work as well. And I wish you Godspeed. Thank you.
The gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Alba.
Speaker, point of personal privilege.
All right, proceed.
Mr. Speaker, members of the House, wanted to tell you a little bit about Tom Rust, the things you don't know about. But first, I want to notice that next on your list will be the gentleman from Madison, Ed Scott, unretiring, because I see that since Hugo is caucus chair that Ed was going to be transportation chair, and now he's back going, oh, you're kidding me. Russ, why didn't you tell me? So one of the things I've really loved about being in the House of Delegates for 22 years is the opportunity to meet so many different people. When you grow up in Northern Virginia, you kind of think the rest of the world is the way you live, you know, that everybody else kind of is stuck in traffic and the people are like you, and you come down here and you meet all sorts of different people. And it's not very much opportunity in a normal life for you to become friends with somebody who's almost as old as your dad. And what Tom and I had spent many hours with Vivian and others working on transportation bills, and Ann, his wife, I think she told me, I think that Tom's cheating on me with Albo because we had spent so much time together. But one of the things I just really enjoyed about it is, and people don't really maybe not know, Tom Rust is a really funny and cool dude. I got to tell you, we would come down and he'd pick me up at my house and drive down to Richmond, and we would just have just a great time talking and talking about a lot of you, actually, behind your backs. And but the one thing I was thinking on the way down is this guy is way cooler than my dad. My dad is never that cool. Tom has just got the greatest personality. He's just a fun-loving guy. He's done so much with his life. And I just wanted to make sure, Tom, that you knew that not only serving with you, but being your bud is one of the greatest things I've had in this 22 years. Thanks.
Tom, I know you don't like all this, but at least you don't have to wait to your funeral to hear all. Gentlewoman from Fairfax, Ms. Fox.
Which, Mr. Speaker, after Albo's comments, may not be too far away.
Gentleman from Fairfax, Ms. Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Point of personal privilege.
Gentlewoman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I won't use our formal references to say again and again the gentleman from Fairfax, the gentleman from Fairfax, but the gentleman from West Springfield High School and the gentleman from Reston have spoken such truth, and yet I want to add a little bit to it. You think that Northern Virginia is this big monolith, and we come down here, we all know each other, and occasionally you might even say, my God, what are they up to now? Tom's office is the only office, the only home of any member of Northern Virginia that I know the way to. And I say that because I want to underscore what his service represents and why you've heard such accolades about that service since 1971. It's not just that his door is open, but that he reaches out to gather every piece of information that he can, and he does it with respect to the individuals who he believes have an interest that might help weave the right solution and in as close as possible, a win-win solution, but always in love of public service, that we've got to work together. And every time over the years that I was invited to come to Tom's office, and he is a very good engineer, it's a well-run office, very impressive as a businessman, I always walked away with feeling that we had an honest, constructive dialogue, and that the commitment to go forward would be on behalf of what was going to be in all of our best interests. That kind of character is invaluable, but Tom, I certainly hope that it's also your legacy. And this is why I wanted to emphasize what you have meant in your public service, so that each and every one of us can take a lesson from that open door, that constructive approach, and yes, one heck of a lot of intelligence in putting those pieces together. Thank you so much for your service.
The gentleman from Loudon, Mr. Minshew.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I met the gentleman from Herndon back in 1985 when I was a fledgling lawyer, and my law partners told me, if you want to see competence, public service, and dedicated professional acumen, go see Tom Rust over at Patton Harris. I've had a chance of working with this fine gentleman from the town of Herndon, both as a professional engineer, as mayor of the town of Herndon, on the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, and in this distinguished body. And Mr. Speaker, I can tell you there is no man who combines those elements better than Tom Rust. If you go in your dictionary to the I tab and you look up the word integrity, there's a picture of Tom Rust there. Mr. Speaker, as we bid adieu to this great man, I love this guy so much, I will leave him wish his Hokie basketball team much success when they meet my Duke Blue Devils tonight in Blacksburg. We will miss this gentleman from Herndon, Mr. Speaker, and I hope we can find another professional engineer to serve on the Professional Engineers Caucus of this House. Thank you.